Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And I'm happy to have back on this episode Brandy Mabra. Welcome, Brandy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So glad to have her. If you want to go back to episode number 248, we were just talking about it's been a
Mhm.
lot longer than we thought since we chatted with each other. Brandy, as I start with everyone, tell folks who you are and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yeah, I have almost 2 decades worth of healthcare business and leadership experience. So I have been on what I call all the sides of healthcare. So I've been on the private practice side, the corporate side, the payer side, now entrepreneurial side. And so I've been able to take all that expertise and now help others, with specifically on the business side of their practice. I always get asked if I am a practitioner or if I am a therapist or I'm a clinician, and I have a strong clinical background, come from a family of healthcare. So I'm very, very familiar and love the field, but also know that it can present some challenges, especially as you're growing and scaling businesses. So that's my lane.
Yeah.
That's my lane.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And Brandy brings just a lot of expertise that I think we can draw from. And one of the things that we were chatting about before we started recording, just how much there's so much buzz about AI and whether or not it's gonna hurt our professions and that kind of thing. And Brandy just has some great stories about that. And one I know that she mentioned was just around Salesforce. You want to say more about that, and maybe tell folks what Salesforce is if they aren't sure what that is.
Yeah, so Salesforce is a huge company. I know it specifically from when I was with a specific payer. We would have to go around and talk to different practices. And so it's more or less on the sales side, it's like a CRM where you're able to document things too, but it's more tech based. And recently I was reading about how they laid off 4,000 employees to move to more of an AI model, which makes sense. You want to try to
Hmm.
be profitable, efficient, effective, all those things. However, the interesting thing is that they have decided that probably wasn't the best move
Hmm.
because the reliability of actually having humans and just even the engagement from the human side is missing. So they are now having some regrets because they've lost money. They thought that they were going to gain money from profitability because of not having payroll, and now they're in process of losing money, more than what they thought that they would because of the
Hmm.
migration over to AI. So I think
Yeah,
when we
it's
think about it from a healthcare perspective, it's really interesting.
yeah. Ironically, their sales have gone down.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yes, right.
though, right, yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, and I think for a lot of us, there is a lot of angst around the advent of AI. I did a short YouTube video just about that, and I think one of the things is I think anytime change comes along, we tend to let our anxiety get the best of us around
Yes.
those things. But you even go back in history and you look at big changes that came along, like the invention of the train, the invention of the automobile, cell phones, all of those kinds of things were big life changing things um, that we all embrace now.
Absolutely. Business has cycles, I always say. And so I think when you've been around it enough years, even with me 2 decades, there's a lot that I've seen in the 20 plus years, and there's ups and downs. And so even with innovation's great. But you also, from a business perspective, you have to be careful as you're jumping onto almost what the
Hmm.
latest and greatest. You don't want to be what I call the blockbuster of business, or you don't want to think where Amazon isn't going to come and actually take over, because there's an interesting documentary with Jeff Bezos about that very thing. He tried to talk to like Barnes and Noble, and he tried to talk to some of the existing companies, and they laughed at him. So that's the
Hmm.
biggest change would be the internet. And so I think from a business perspective, we have to pay attention to industry. We have to pay attention to what's happening now so we can be smart business owners, but also we have to think about, especially from a leadership standpoint, what does this mean for this time next year? And so
Hmm.
even with AI, there's so many tools, and this time last year everybody was like chat gpt, and now everyone, we just had a conversation this past Tuesday about migration over to cloud. And so one of the things that I always say is be picky and make sure, especially if you have team, for how you're bringing them in that conversation. And then if there's a particular tool that you love, maybe don't get so attached to it, and maybe get attached
Mm-hmm.
to the workflow of it, or get attached to what it can do. And then also think about if it goes out of business, because all of these companies are truly, they're tech companies, right? So they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
race to the top. They're trying to make decisions that they think is best for really almost their bottom line, and just what's going to help them get to a certain place in industry. But also what that means for us as we're continuing to scale and grow businesses is that that means that sometimes that tool won't be around, or maybe that tool could go out
Mm-hmm.
of business, or that tool might merge with another tool. So when you think about that conversation, because that's what's happened in other past cycles, then you have to be prepared for that. And so I think some people miss that piece because they get so excited about what a certain
Right.
piece of software could
Right.
do.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, like you said, is there are cycles, and I think ultimately, particularly in our professions, people really want that face to face,
Mm-hmm.
person to person contact rather than it being on a screen or virtually or that sort of thing. And so I think that's one of the things that, like that story you told about Salesforce, people are not wanting to necessarily interact with AI as
Yeah.
much as they thought they did.
Yeah, and you could tell. I mean, you can tell at this point in time too, in some of the conversation, who is using AI, who is doing things from more of an organic lens. And I think
Mm-hmm.
automation has been around for a long time. That's not new. And being able
Mm-hmm.
to have software help with just the day to day, that's not new. But how
All
the
right.
tools that we're using today, that's what's new, right? So we have to
Mm-hmm.
pitch and pull from the past for what was this like before, and what stayed, what
Mm-hmm.
didn't stay, and then how did it evolve. And so as you look
Mm-hmm.
throughout the years, there's some, like I think about the implementation of EHR systems and going from paper charts, and so with
Right.
that, like there were some tools that people were like, oh, this is the best tool. And then some of those tools aren't even around today because they couldn't survive certain economic
Mm-hmm.
cycles, or they merged with somebody else, or they got bought out. So you
Mm-hmm.
be, again, just mindful of it, be excited about it, be aware
Mm-hmm.
of it, but also think about it from a deeper lens. And I think sometimes people miss that part.
As you've just obviously you've researched this a lot and thought a lot about it. What do you see as kind of the evolution of all of the AI things, particularly for therapists and counselors and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that it's an important conversation for people to be part of the change, right? And I love it because I know that there are some even our clients are helping with the development of it, thought processes. I know that even with ChatGPT, they're trying to do ChatGPT health. I don't know what's going to happen with that, considering some of the things that are happening with them right now.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think it will replace the human aspect of it by any means. I was also
Mm-hmm.
reading on just the next generation. So I have a son, he's 20 years old. And the next generation, actually, there's almost too much of a good thing. And so, because we've been so, to your point, what you're saying, of we're missing that face to face like connection, and being able to actually have real time conversations, then the
Mm-hmm.
next generation actually is being brought up more with that. So what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean when we get to the virtual space, years to come? So
Right.
I think when we think about healthcare, when we think about therapy, when we think about just those real-time conversations, I think there will always be, because this is, as soon as the virtual space opened, I think there will be a combination of hybrid always. I think there will be the
Mm-hmm.
folks who want to do in person and want that connection. And then there will be the person who maybe does virtual sometimes, if that's something that the payer will continue to pay for, because
Mm-hmm.
that conversation that's happening as well. But I think ultimately it will be a combination of both, because the technology is there. I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I think how we use it will change, and the frequency will change.
I think what AI, as I've thought about this, because I use AI just about every single
Oh,
day
every
in
day.
some form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, even if you're doing just a Google search, you're using AI now. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things I've thought about is that what it will do is make our knowledge base, well, it's already doing this, our knowledge base about things much more accessible,
Yes.
and that and the organization of data, it can do that better than anything or anybody and that kind of thing. But like you said, the one thing it doesn't do is that face-to-face, human-to-human contact. And I can't imagine that it could ever mimic that because, it tries even now. I mean,
Mhm.
you ask ChatGPT a question and it's just so friendly, and its
Right.
response and tells you how great your question is and all that kind of thing. And so it's been programmed to do all of that. Yeah, but that still doesn't replace the human to human contact.
It doesn't, and I think about,
Hmm.
like, a conversation that we were having, as a group with, for private practice CEO, and how can you incorporate some of the conversations that maybe clients are having with ChatGPT and bringing in those things. So I think about even
Hmm.
just the visit prior to AI where you would Google something. You would be like, "Well, I Googled X, Y, and Z, and I think I'm dying,"
Uh-huh.
because of
Right.
what's come across. And so
Right.
I think
Right.
being smart with the interactions, and that's where
Hmm.
the real time, like, this is what it's telling you, but is it right? Is it wrong? Especially with some of the hallucinations that are still happening. I think as time goes by, it'll probably get smarter, but I think now is the time for foundational work and especially again, going back to the team, other providers, like, what are you doing? What's the stance for the practice? And then also, how are you incorporating those AI conversations into like the everyday conversations that you're having? Because if you can meet the
Hmm.
person where they're at, then I think that's where you can go deeper and definitely make some of those sessions stronger too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So and thinking about what you do, Brandy, and just working with maybe larger practices and
Yeah.
different healthcare organizations over the years, where do you see that we can make the best use of AI?
I think with what you said, the organization structure of it, I think also again, like having like policy and procedures around how the practice uses it, making sure that people understand paid versions from free versions, what you can put in, what you can't put in, those types of things. But ultimately, I think the in the weeds work is where it's going to really shine. And I think that's where
Hmm.
it's shining now. But I think even when going back to the Salesforce conversation, you're still going to need some type of director or some person to oversee it because automation is automation.
Hmm.
Computers are computers and they can
Uh-huh.
break. And so you need like checks and balances as you're working with AI, and you need checks and balances with the team and how they're working with AI. And
Hmm.
definitely from a patient perspective, you need to make sure that you have checks and balances, I believe, when it
Hmm.
comes to AI as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing too is that I got to maybe switch a little bit here. One of the things that I think comes up is people going to AI to get advice
Mhm.
and so that feels like a threat to therapists. Not that we give advice. I mean, it's anybody that's in this field knows that you're not in the business of giving advice, but more of being partners and walking with
Yeah.
people along the way and that kind of thing. But one of the things with that is that sometimes the advice isn't all that good.
No, it's not.
And so that's something. And I think too, I think that the fear of AI replacing therapists is they might be asking those questions, but ultimately they're still seeking out that human to human
Mhm.
contact.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
110%. I think all of us within the healthcare space, especially from a practitioner standpoint, are safe, right? Because even
Mm-hmm.
using where people, it still needs again that checks and balances. It's and people still want that human to human connection. People still need to feel validated and understood, and not to the expense of yes, like being a yes person. And even if you tell ChatGPT to be honest, it's still honest in a way that is still super, nice. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you need somebody to show up truly that mirror and just to be honest. And so I think that it will never, and even if you, I'm sure you know this, just with everything that's happening in society and just the climate around us, economy, all of it, like there's now a big boom. There's an uptick when it comes to just the therapy piece and mental health and people
Mm-hmm.
reaching out
Mm-hmm.
to, needing services.
Hmm.
So I think it's an exciting time. I think it's an exciting time for technology. I think it's an exciting time for healthcare. And I think it's even with some of the challenges that we're facing, I think there's a huge opportunity for people to step up and to be
Hmm.
part of the change and to help for what the change is going to look like even 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if they choose to.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that I think we can fall a trap into is not listening to our clients and not listening to our patients
Yep.
in a way of really getting to what they want for themselves as opposed
Mhm.
to what we think's best for them,
Yep.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Brandy, what are some other things in just your work? I know we've got to be mindful of our time, but then the work that you've been doing with therapists and people in the mental health fields, what are you seeing that there are their biggest challenges that you hear that you help them with?
I think right now, because of some of the changes, there is still the economy piece that is happening. And so they're having to be more strategic about how they're scaling their practices. And I think for the ones who are doing really well, and what I see is because they're thinking outside the box, right? And so they're
Mm-hmm.
thinking outside the box from a multidisciplinary standpoint. So I work with a lot of different credentials, which I feel really blessed to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones who are profitable, the ones who are really having the most engaged teams are the ones who are adding a level of sophistication to their practices outside of even just like one-on-one work, right? Or changing it up with the type of
Mm-hmm.
specialties that they're bringing into their practice in order to go deeper with the client. And
Mm-hmm.
then also being some practices right now who are strictly private pay or now, because I work with global clients, are in the place of thinking about, do I need to add in a payer? And so that
Mm-hmm.
conversation, just because of some of the things that are happening within economy. So the business acumen that you need today compared to a couple years ago is completely different. And the leadership
Right.
skills that you need today compared to
Mm-hmm.
even a couple of months ago, as AI continues to
Mm-hmm.
change, is
Mm-hmm.
completely different, right? So
Right.
they're having to be more strategic, more intentional,
Mm-hmm.
more purposeful with how they're communicating. Why are they doing certain things? And kind of gone are the days of let's put up something on Psychology Today and people are just going to flood in, or let's put something on social media. There has to be more intention behind it. I think the other thing is being more involved online and offline. Some folks
Mm-hmm.
are having to really do more boots on the ground, conversations, partnerships, referral networks, build those things. And so I always think about, just from when I first started, I'm like, oh, this is my world. This is like the old school way
Mm-hmm.
of doing things, the tried and true way of doing things. And that's what people are
Right.
starting to find out.
Yeah. And that brings us full circle around to
Mm-hmm.
that whole idea of the human to human contact. I think
Yep.
the best referral sources for any practice are those word of mouth,
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things, and not depending on a social media algorithm to bring you up and people could connect with people that way. So it's just, yeah,
Yeah,
it's, yeah.
I always say that if big hospital systems with millions and millions and millions of dollars in resources out the yin yang, if they are sitting at like a baseball game with a table, or they're doing, we're getting ready to go into warm weather, like movies in the park, and they're having to have these conversations, then us as private practice, with private practices and businesses and small businesses, like we have to do the same thing, right? Because
Hmm.
there's a recipe of success that's there too.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation, and I know that we could probably spend all day
Mhm.
talking about these things, and it's really been very, the whole AI conversation, and we didn't even talk about this, tech companies getting into the mental health field, things like
Mhm.
BetterHelp, Talkspace, those kinds of things are things that people might see as a threat, but I think in the long run people are going to still go for that person to person contact.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, even I read something with BetterHelp how people are getting frustrated because when we think about team engagement and buy-in, when you work for a
Hmm.
big company like that, sometimes those things are missing. So people are missing sessions, like the therapists or the practitioners aren't coming, they're not showing up, they're canceling, and so because the team engagement is missing
Yeah.
in
Right.
some of those places. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think if you have a practice that is well run, I think if you have a practice where your team feels supported and is engaged and you are being a great leader, And definitely with that business savvy, I think honestly, you're in the best position to do well in an environment like
Right.
this. 110%.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in the whole workplace environment, so for some reason, our conversation reminded me of this last time I went to the dentist. I had needed to change dentists because of my
Mhm.
insurance stuff and that sort of thing. But anyway, the dentist I used to go to was more low tech. They were just kind of old school kind of dentist. And then I came to this new place and they had all the amazing tech stuff, like 3D imaging of your mouth and all of that kind of stuff. And you could just tell the people working there, the dental hygienists and dentists and everything, they were just having a great time with each
Yeah.
other.
Hmm.
And and it reflects in the care that I got from that. So I mean, that
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
think you have to embrace everything. Like, so you can't be stuck in the past, and you
Mm-hmm.
also need a really great a team as well. So
Mm-hmm.
you have both and you can have that nice compliment, then you'll have exactly what you had at the dentist. I love to hear that.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
your visit went well.
Yeah, it went well. I had a good checkup, no cavities, so that's good.
Yeah.
So, well, Brandy, tell folks how they can get in touch with you and some of the things that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find me on Instagram. That's kind of my place to hang out, and also LinkedIn. I'm at Brandy Mabra, BrandyMabra. And then you can also find me on my website at savvyclover.com, SAVVYCLOVER.com. If you go there, then there is a number of tools that is there waiting for you, from practice health assessments to master classes that I have, and then I also have my own podcast as well called CEO
Yeah.
Conversations. So
Yeah. Tell us about the podcast real quick.
yeah, so the podcast is it's fun. So it comes out every week. We
Mm-hmm.
have conversations around just what's happening in a healthcare economy now. We also have some really great guests that come on and chime in from different lenses. Like we talked about travel. I love travel. I think travel is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've talked about travel. We talked about some of the business side of how to hire, how to engage your team. The conversations are definitely for the multi seven figure, or that six-figure person that's going into higher levels of revenue. But it's fun. It's really, really fun.
Yeah. Well,
The
great.
challenge.
Great. We'll have links in the show notes and the show summary
Thank you.
for anybody that wants to get to that quickly. And Brandy, hope to have you back again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gordon. Thank you for having me here.